So we've got two horrific attacks, right? They both happen in the same Sydney suburb, but one gets called mass murder and the other terrorism. In this explainer, we're going to use the source material to dig into why that one single word makes such a huge difference.
You know, the community of Bondi was just shattered by mass violence, not once, but twice. And the way officials responded to each attack, well, it really makes you stop and ask a pretty big question. What actually is terrorism, and why does that label even matter so much?
All right, first things first, let's just lay out the basic facts. To really get to the heart of this story, we've got to look at what's similar and, what's crucially different between these two awful tragedies. So if you look here, it's all laid out pretty clearly. You've got April 2024. A man with knives goes after women in a shopping mall. That gets called mass murder. Then fast forward to December 2025. Two gunmen attack a Jewish celebration on the beach. And that? Instantly labeled terrorism. I mean, same suburb, but two totally different official calls. How does that happen? Okay, so let's dig into that December 2025 shooting first. From the very beginning, right from the get-go, the authorities were crystal clear. This was an act of terrorism, no question. This wasn't random. It was a completely calculated assault. You have two gunmen opening fire on the Hanukkah by the Sea celebration. This is a public event, hosted by the local Chabad. And in the middle of all that horror, a bystander does something incredible. Heroically tackles and disarms one of the attackers. And get this, police leader found IEDs, improvised explosive devices, in their car. It shows they were planning for even more destruction. And the human cost, just staggering. 16 people were murdered. 16! One of them was a 10-year-old child. And just like that, in an instant, this became the single deadliest terrorist attack in Australia's history. And like I said, right from the top, officials left absolutely no room for doubt. The Prime Minister's words really framed it, calling it ideologically driven, a direct, targeted assault on the Jewish community. Okay, so now let's rewind the clock. Let's go back to April 2024, to the stabbings at the Westfield Shopping Center. And even though the horror was just immense, this attack was talked about in a totally different way. With this one, the official story was, well, a complete 180. Authorities were quick to rule out terrorism. Instead, the whole narrative zeroed in on two things: the attacker's long, documented history with schizophrenia, and a motive that the coroner's inquest heard was likely driven by a hatred towards women. And honestly, the numbers, they really tell the story here. There's just no doubt about who the attacker was targeting. Of the 16 people he stabbed, 14 of them are women. And of the 6 people who tragically died, 5 were women. So that's the official classification: mass murder, not terrorism. And that brings us right back to the central puzzle we're trying to solve here. Why? Why the different label? So why the different labels? You might think it's about the number of victims or how much fear it caused, but it's not. It all comes down to a very, very specific legal definition that Australian authorities use. See, everything hinges on this one legal phrase: ideological cause. For an attack to legally be called terrorism in Australia, the authorities have to prove that it was motivated by a recognized political, religious, or ideological cause. That's the test. Now, for the 2025 shooting, this was, well, it was a clear-cut case. It's almost a textbook example. You've got an attack on a specific religious group. It happens during a major religious holiday. And it was clearly driven by the well-established ideology of antisemitism. It checked all the boxes of the legal definition perfectly. But the 2024 stabbing, that was seen through a totally different lens. The attacker's severe mental illness was put forward as the main explanation, framing it as an act of an individual's own pathology. And here's the crucial part. At the time, misogyny just wasn't treated as a collective ideological cause in the same way that something like antisemitism is under Australian law. And this gap in the definition, it's kicked off a massive debate. People are asking, are our laws actually equipped to handle the new and evolving ways that extremist hate shows up? Yeah, and the 2025 terror attack, it didn't just happen in a vacuum. It came after a huge, dramatic spike in anti-Semitic incidents all across Australia. To put that in perspective for you, the number of reported incidents in 2024 was triple what it was in previous years. Triple. And after the 2024 stabbings, something pretty disturbing happened online.
These incel or involuntary celibate groups, they actually celebrated the attacker, calling him Saint Kachi. This just fueled these really urgent calls to finally recognize gender-based hate as a terror ideology. And guess what? That pressure is starting to work. There's now an official review of the terrorism definition on the books, and even Australia's intelligence agency, ASIO, is now acknowledging that, yes, misogyny can be a motivating extremist ideology.
For Jewish community leaders, this was obviously devastating, but they weren't surprised. They said that with the way hate had been escalating, the 2025 attack felt all but inevitable. And now they're demanding real, concrete action, not just words, to make sure their community is safe. And so all of this leaves us with a really critical question for the future. When you see violence that's so clearly motivated by a shared collective hatred, it doesn't matter if it's against a religion or a gender. How do our legal definitions have to evolve to actually recognize that threat and to protect all of us from every form of terror?